The fluorescent lights of the Jefferson High School conference room buzzed overhead as I slipped through the heavy oak door. My son Daniel sat hunched at the defendant's table, his shoulders curved inward like he was trying to disappear. Across from him, Brittany adjusted her designer blazer and whispered something to her attorney that made them both smile. The kind of smile that made my hands curl into fists inside my coat pockets. I hadn't planned to come. Daniel made me promise I'd stay home, let him handle this alone. "It's just a formality, Mom," he'd said last week, his voice hollow. "The lawyer says we'll present our case, and that'll be that." But I'd seen that look in his eyes before, back when he was 10 and the other kids made fun of him for choosing teaching over baseball. That look that said he'd already given up before the fight even started. The clerk was reading from a stack of papers, her monotone voice bouncing off the walls. Nobody noticed me slide into the back row, nobody except Superintendent Williams. His eyes met mine across the room, and I watched his face go from bored bureaucrat to something I couldn't quite read. Shock, maybe, or recognition. His pen stopped moving mid-word. "Is there something wrong, Dr. Williams?" Brittany's lawyer asked, following his gaze. The superintendent cleared his throat and looked back down at his notes. "No, nothing. Please continue." But I saw him glance at me again, then lean over to whisper something to the board secretary. She turned in her seat, squinting at me through her glasses, and her mouth formed a small O. That's when Daniel turned around. When he saw me, every emotion I'd watched him suppress for the past 2 years flooded his face at once. Relief, fear, hope, shame. He mouthed the words, "What are you doing here?" But I just gave him the same look I'd given him every morning before school for 18 years. The one that said, "I've got you." Let me back up. This didn't start in that conference room. It started 23 months ago on a Tuesday morning when Emma's kindergarten teacher called Daniel during his lunch period. I was babysitting Emma that day because Brittany had a client meeting that ran until 7 p.m., which meant I'd picked Emma up from school at 3 and made her the grilled cheese she loved with the crusts cut off exactly so. Emma was at my kitchen table, struggling with her homework, tears streaming down her little face. "Grandma, the letters keep moving," she'd said, her small finger tracing the words that seemed to dance across the page. "Why won't they stay still?" I'd spent 30 years as an elementary school principal. I'd seen every learning difference, every struggle, every challenge a child could face. And I recognized dyslexia the moment I saw Emma transpose her B's and D's, the way she held the book at odd angles, trying to make the words cooperate. "Sweetheart," I'd said gently, kneeling beside her chair, "has anyone at school talked to you about how you see letters?" She shook her head. "Mom says I'm not trying hard enough. She says I need to focus more." That sentence hit me like a slap. Not trying hard enough. As if this beautiful, creative, brilliant child wasn't already trying with everything she had. When Daniel came to pick Emma up that evening, I told him what I'd observed. His face went pale. "I thought maybe she just needed more time," he said quietly. "Brittany kept saying all kids learn at different speeds. But Mom, if it's dyslexia, we need to get her evaluated. We need an IEP, specialized instruction, support services." "I know, honey. I'll help you through the process. I've done this 100 times. But when Daniel brought it up to Brittany that night, I got the phone call at 11 p.m. Daniel, calling from his car, parked outside their house. "She went ballistic," he said, and I could hear the tears in his voice. "She said I was trying to label Emma, that I was making excuses for bad parenting, that if I just read to her more, she'd be fine. Mom," she called me useless. She said this was my fault for passing on defective genes. That was the first crack. Over the next 6 months, I watched as more cracks appeared. Brittany started staying out later, started taking weekend trips for professional development conferences, started posting photos on Instagram from expensive restaurants with people Daniel didn't know. Her followers count climbed, her brand partnerships increased, and her presence at home decreased. Daniel threw himself into helping Emma. He researched dyslexia until 2 in the morning. He bought special fonts and colored overlays. He attended the IEP meetings I helped him schedule with the school. He sat with Emma for hours, patiently helping her decode words, celebrating every small victory like it was the Super Bowl. Emma flourished under his care. Her reading level started climbing. Her confidence grew. She stopped crying over homework and started bringing home artwork, elaborate drawings with stories she'd dictate to Daniel to write down. But Brittany noticed none of this. Or if she did, she didn't care. The divorce papers came on a Wednesday. Daniel called me from his classroom during his planning period, his voice shaking so badly I could barely understand him. "She's leaving, Mom. She said she can't do this anymore. She said she married a teacher, not a special needs babysitter." She said. His voice broke. She said Emma's issues are holding back her brand image. That potential sponsors see her as a family influencer, and she needs to present a perfect family or pivot to a different demographic. I drove straight to his school and held my son while he sobbed in his empty classroom, his third-grade bulletin boards about kindness and perseverance mocking us from the walls. "It's going to be okay," I whispered, even though I wasn't sure I believed it. But the divorce was just the beginning. Brittany moved into a downtown loft with her new boyfriend, some tech investor with a Tesla and a penthouse view. The custody arrangement was standard. Emma during the week with Daniel, every other weekend with Brittany. Child support was set. Everything seemed settled. For 6 months, Emma adjusted. She still had weekly therapy appointments for her dyslexia. She still brought home drawings and stories. She still asked for grilled cheese with no crusts when she came to my house every Tuesday. Then, 4 months ago, everything changed. Daniel called me one evening, his voice tight with panic. "Mom, I need you to read something." The document he forwarded to my email made my blood run cold. Brittany was filing for full custody. Her petition claimed Daniel was unable to provide adequate educational support for a child with special needs. That his limited income as a public school teacher couldn't give Emma the therapeutic interventions and enrichment opportunities she deserved. That Emma was falling behind academically under his care. Every word was a knife. Every accusation was a lie. "Daniel," I said slowly, "do you have documentation of Emma's progress?" "I have everything. Every IEP update, every reading assessment, every therapy session report. Mom, Emma's reading went from first grade level to third grade level in 18 months. She's thriving." "Then we fight this." But fighting meant lawyers, and lawyers meant money Daniel didn't have. The legal aid attorney he finally found was overworked and underprepared. "These cases are tough," she told him during their first meeting. "Unless you can prove the mother is unfit, courts usually favor more financial resources, especially for a child with special needs requiring ongoing support." I watched my son spiral. He stopped sleeping. He stopped eating. His principal called me, worried about him. "Margaret, Daniel's one of our best teachers," she said, "but he's barely holding it together. Is there anything we can do?" What could they do? What could anyone do except watch as Brittany's expensive attorneys filed motion after motion, burying Daniel in paperwork he couldn't afford to fight? The hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning at 10 a.m. Not a courtroom. This was an educational custody dispute, so it fell under the school district's jurisdiction. The superintendent would hear both sides and make a recommendation to the family court judge. The night before, I went to Daniel's apartment. Emma was already asleep in her room, surrounded by the books Daniel had collected for her, the ones with dyslexia-friendly fonts and the stories about kids who were different but brave. "I don't think I can do this," Daniel said. We were sitting at his kitchen table, the same table where he'd helped Emma with thousands of hours of homework. "Her lawyers are going to destroy me, Mom. They're going to make it sound like I'm hurting Emma by keeping her with me." "But you're not." "I know that. You know that. But how do I prove it? How do I prove that reading together every night matters more than the private tutor Brittany's promising? How do I prove that Emma feels safe with me?" I reached across the table and took his hand. "You tell the truth. You show them the evidence. You let Emma's progress speak for itself." "And if that's not enough?" I didn't have an answer. So I told him to get some sleep, and I drove home through the dark Portland streets, past the coffee shops and boutiques of Brittany's neighborhood, past the school where I'd spent 3 decades of my life, past the playground where I'd pushed Daniel on the swings when he was Emma's age. When I got home, I didn't go to bed. Instead, I went to my office, the one I'd kept organized even in retirement, and I pulled out a file box I hadn't opened in years. Inside were letters. Hundreds of letters from former teachers, parents, students, letters thanking me for advocating for their children, letters from the superintendent praising my work on special education initiatives, awards, certificates, documented proof of 30 years spent fighting for kids exactly like Emma. And at the bottom of the box, I found something else. A photo from 15 years ago at a district gala. In the picture, I stood next to a young man in his first year as vice principal. His name was written on the back, James Williams, promising leader, will go far. The same James Williams who was now superintendent, the same James Williams who would be hearing Daniel's case in 8 hours. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I built a timeline. I compiled Emma's progress reports, her IEP updates, her therapy session notes. I found the attendance logs showing Daniel present at every single meeting, every parent-teacher conference, every school event. I found Brittany's Instagram posts geotagged from Cabo, from Vegas, from Miami, all posted during Emma's scheduled weekend visits with her. I found text messages Daniel had shown me, messages where Brittany asked him to keep Emma just this once because she had a content creation opportunity that couldn't be rescheduled. Messages where she told him Emma's learning differences were bad for my brand. By 6 a.m., I had a folder 2 inches thick. By 7 a.m., I'd printed copies and organized them by category. By 8 a.m., I'd showered, dressed in the navy suit I used to wear to board meetings, and loaded everything into my car. Daniel had made me promise not to come. But I'd spent 3 decades fighting for children who couldn't fight for themselves. I wasn't about to stop now. Which brought me back to that conference room, sitting in the back row while Brittany's lawyer stood up to present her opening statement. "Ladies and gentlemen of the board," he began, his voice smooth as honey, "this case is about one thing: what's best for Emma Chen, a 7-year-old girl with significant learning challenges who deserves every opportunity to succeed." He clicked a remote, and a PowerPoint presentation appeared on the screen. Photos of Brittany with Emma, carefully curated, professionally shot, hashtagged with number mom life and number special needs warrior. Photos I knew were staged, taken during the few hours per month Brittany actually spent with her daughter. Miss Rodriguez has secured a position at Portland Academy, one of the top schools for children with learning differences. She's arranged for private tutoring 3 times per week, with a specialist who charges $200 per hour. She's prepared to provide occupational therapy, speech therapy, and educational therapy. She has the resources to give Emma everything she needs. He paused, letting that sink in. Then he turned to look at Daniel. Mr. Chen, by his own admission, works as a 3rd-grade teacher earning $42,000 per year. He lives in a 1-bedroom apartment where Emma sleeps on a pull-out couch. He cannot afford private specialists. He cannot provide the intensive interventions Emma requires. And while we acknowledge his love for his daughter, love alone is not enough to address significant educational needs. I watched Daniel's shoulders sink lower with every word. I watched the board members taking notes, their faces neutral but their body language saying everything. This was already decided in their minds. The man with limited resources versus the woman offering everything money could buy. Brittany's lawyer continued. "We have testimony from 3 educational specialists who have reviewed Emma's case. They all agree that Emma would benefit from a more intensive, well-funded educational program. We have documentation showing that Emma's reading level, while improved, is still below grade level. We have..." Objection. The word came from Daniel's legal aid attorney, finally speaking up. Emma's reading level is not below grade level. According to her most recent assessment, she's reading at a 3rd grade level, which is exactly where she should be as a 2nd grader. Brittany's lawyer smiled. "My apologies. Let me rephrase. Emma's reading level is appropriate for an average child. But Emma is not average. She has dyslexia, which means she needs exceptional support, not adequate support. Mr. Chen provides adequate. Miss Rodriguez is offering exceptional." Daniel's attorney started to respond, but Superintendent Williams held up his hand. "I think we've heard the opening statement. Mr. Chen, would you like to present your case?" Daniel stood slowly, gathering his papers with shaking hands. He walked to the front of the room, and I could see him trying to remember everything his lawyer had coached him to say. But when he opened his mouth, the practiced speech evaporated. "I love my daughter," he said simply. "I know that sounds like nothing compared to private schools and expensive tutors, but I've spent the last 18 months learning everything I can about dyslexia. I've adapted every lesson plan I use with my own students to help Emma. I've sat with her every single night, helping her decode words, celebrating when she finishes a chapter book, encouraging her when she gets frustrated." He clicked his own remote, and a different kind of slideshow appeared. Not professional photos, but real moments. Emma at the kitchen table, concentrating hard on her homework. Emma at the library, checking out a stack of books. Emma's artwork covering the walls of their small apartment. Emma's progress reports showing steady, documented improvement. "Her reading level isn't just appropriate," Daniel continued, his voice growing stronger. "It's incredible. When Emma started 1st grade, she couldn't recognize basic sight words. She cried every time she had to read out loud. Now she reads chapter books before bed, she writes stories, she draws pictures and creates entire worlds with characters and plots. She's not behind. She's thriving." He pulled out a piece of paper. This is Emma's most recent IEP progress report. It shows that she's met or exceeded every single goal we set for her. Her special education teacher called her progress remarkable. Her reading specialist said she's one of the most improved students she's ever worked with. Brittany leaned over to whisper something to her lawyer. He nodded and stood up. Mr. Chen, we don't dispute that Emma has made progress. What we're saying is that she could make more progress with additional resources. Don't you want your daughter to have every advantage? Of course I do, but Emma doesn't need advantages. She needs consistency, patience, and love. She needs someone who understands that learning differences aren't deficits. She needs more than you can provide, Brittany interrupted, speaking for the first time. Her voice was sharp, cutting through the room. Daniel, you're a good person. But you're a public school teacher in a one-bedroom apartment. I can give Emma opportunities you can't. I can give her the best education, the best therapists, the best everything. You can give her money, Daniel said quietly. But when's the last time you gave her your time? When's the last time you actually sat down and helped her with her homework? When's the last time you went to an IEP meeting? When's the last time you even saw her? Brittany's face flushed. I've been busy building a career so I can provide for her future. Someone has to think long-term. Long-term? Daniel's voice cracked. Emma is 7 years old. She doesn't need your long-term business strategy. She needs her parent to show up. She needs someone who knows that her favorite book is Charlotte's Web, and that she likes her grilled cheese with no crusts, and that she calls her dyslexia her special reader brain, because that's what I taught her to help her feel proud instead of ashamed. The room went silent. Even Brittany's lawyer looked uncomfortable. That's when Superintendent Williams spoke. I'd like to hear from the child if possible. Is Emma available to testify? Daniel shook his head. I didn't want to put her through this. She's 7. This isn't her burden to carry. Actually, Brittany's lawyer said, we have Emma available via video call if the board would like to speak with her. Miss Rodriguez felt it was important for Emma to have a voice in this decision. My stomach dropped. Brittany was going to parade Emma in front of the board, coach her to talk about all the wonderful things money could buy. I started to stand, to object, to do something, but Daniel caught my eye and slightly shook his head. Wait, his look said. Not yet. The lawyer set up a laptop, and Emma's face appeared on the screen projected at the front of the room. She was in what looked like Brittany's loft, all white walls and modern furniture. She looked small and nervous. Hi, Emma, Superintendent Williams said gently. Do you know why we're talking today? Emma nodded. Mom said I get to choose where I want to live. Well, not exactly. We're trying to figure out what's best for you. Can you tell us a little bit about school? How are you doing with your reading? I'm good at reading now, Emma said, her voice soft. I read a whole book about a spider last week. Dad helped me with the hard words. That's wonderful. Do you like living with your dad? Emma nodded vigorously. Dad helps me with my homework every night, and he makes me grilled cheese with no crusts, and we go to the library every Saturday. And he tells me I have a special reader brain, not a broken brain. Brittany's lawyer jumped in. Emma, your mom told us she could send you to a really great school, a special school just for kids who read like you do. Would you like that? Emma's face scrunched up, thinking, would Dad still help me with homework? Well, you'd have tutors to help you, professional teachers. But I like when Dad helps me. He's a teacher. He's a really good teacher. His students write him letters. I saw Daniel press his hand to his mouth, fighting tears. The lawyer tried again. Your mom also said she could take you to do lots of fun things, fun activities and trips. Would you like that? I guess, Emma said uncertainly. But I like what we do now. Dad and me and Grandma. We go to the park and the library, and Grandma teaches me to cook. Last week we made cookies. But sweetie, Brittany's voice came from off-screen. Remember how we talked about all the fun places we could go? The museums and the… Mom, you're always on your phone when we go places, Emma said, and the room went very still. You take pictures, but you don't actually look at the stuff with me. Dad looks at everything with me. He reads every sign and answers all my questions. Brittany's lawyer quickly cut in. Thank you, Emma. That's all the questions we have. But Superintendent Williams held up his hand. Actually, Emma, I have one more question. When you think about where you feel safest, where you feel most like yourself, where is that? Emma didn't hesitate. With Dad. And Grandma. That's home. The screen went dark. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Brittany exploded. That's not fair. You can't let a 7-year-old make this decision. She doesn't understand what she's giving up. She doesn't understand that I can provide better opportunities. She doesn't. She understands that she's happy, Daniel said quietly. She understands that she feels safe. Why isn't that enough for you? Because happy and safe don't get her into college. They don't set her up for success. They don't get you more Instagram followers, I said, and every head in the room turned to look at me. I stood up, folder in hand, and started walking down the aisle. Brittany's face went from red to white. "Who is this?" her lawyer demanded. "This is a closed hearing." "This is Margaret Chen," Superintendent Williams said slowly, standing up from his chair, Daniel's mother. "And unless I'm very much mistaken, the former principal of Jefferson Elementary, the woman who built our district's entire special education program from the ground up." He looked at me, and I saw recognition dawn fully in his eyes. "Principal Chen, you were my mentor when I was starting out. You taught me everything I know about advocating for students with learning differences. You once told me that the best IEP in the world means nothing if the child doesn't have someone who believes in them." "I remember," I said. "You were vice principal when we fought to get funding for our first dyslexia specialist. You stood with me in front of the school board and argued that early intervention could change lives. And you were right. That program became a model for the whole state." He sat back down, his face troubled. "But Principal Chen, you have to understand my position here. I can't show favoritism just because I know you." "I'm not asking you to show favoritism," I said. "I'm asking you to look at the evidence. Real evidence, not Instagram posts and promises." I opened my folder and started laying out documents on the table in front of the board. This is Emma's educational file from the past 18 months. Every IEP meeting, every progress report, every therapy session. You'll notice that Daniel Chen attended every single meeting. 100% attendance. You'll also notice that Brittany Rodriguez attended exactly 2 meetings, once in the beginning when the dyslexia diagnosis was made, and once 6 months ago when she was required to sign paperwork. I pulled out more papers. These are Emma's reading assessments. When she started working with Daniel, she was reading at a kindergarten level in 1st grade. She was frustrated, crying, ready to give up. 18 months later, she's reading at a 3rd grade level in 2nd grade. That's not just progress, that's exceptional progress. That's what happens when a child has a parent who shows up every single day. Brittany's lawyer started to object, but I kept going. These are the communications between Daniel and Brittany over the past 6 months. Text messages where Brittany asks Daniel to keep Emma during her scheduled weekends because she has work commitments. 23 times in 6 months. That's more than half of her scheduled time. I pulled out printed Instagram posts. These are posts from Brittany's social media during those same weekends. Here she is in Vegas, here's Miami, here's a yacht in the San Juan Islands. These aren't work commitments. These are pleasure trips that were more important than time with her daughter. "That's not fair," Brittany said, her voice shaking. "You're making me look like a bad mother. I provide for Emma. I pay child support. You pay the legal minimum in child support," I said. $800 per month. While posting photos of $5,000 handbags and exotic vacations, while Daniel buys Emma's books secondhand and clips coupons for groceries because every dollar matters when you're trying to give your child what she needs. I turned to the board. Brittany claims she wants to provide Emma with expensive tutors and private schools, but here's what she doesn't mention. Emma is thriving in her current school. Her teachers love her. Her IEP team celebrates every milestone. She has friends and routines and consistency. Pulling her out of that environment and putting her in a new school with new teachers and new expectations would be traumatic for any child, but especially for a child with dyslexia who has finally found her footing. "This is ridiculous," Brittany's lawyer said. "Miss Chen, you're clearly biased. You're the grandmother. Of course you're going to side with your son." "You're absolutely right," I said. "I am biased. I've watched my son sacrifice everything to give his daughter the best possible life. I've watched him spend his nights researching teaching strategies instead of sleeping. I've watched him cry when Emma finally read her first chapter book because he was so proud. I've watched him be a parent." I pulled out one more document, but if you want unbiased opinions, here they are. Letters from Emma's teachers, letters from her reading specialist, letters from her occupational therapist, all of them saying the same thing. Emma is thriving under Daniel's care. All of them expressing concern about disrupting her current placement. All of them recommending that Emma remain in Daniel's primary custody. I set the stack of letters on the table. There were 17 of them. And finally I said, "This is a financial analysis." Brittany claims she can provide better resources, but Daniel has accessed every free and low-cost resource available. Emma has a full IEP with school-provided services. She has weekly tutoring through a university program where education students work with children for free. She has occupational therapy covered by insurance. The only things Brittany's money would buy are prestige and convenience, and neither of those things help Emma read. The room was silent. Brittany was crying now, her perfect makeup running down her cheeks. "You're making me sound like a monster," she whispered. "I love my daughter." "I'm sure you do," I said, and I meant it. But Emma needs more than love. She needs presence. She needs consistency. She needs a parent who puts her needs above their own ambitions. I looked at Superintendent Williams. "Jim, you and I spent years fighting for kids like Emma, kids who learn differently, who struggle, who need someone to believe in them. You know what makes the difference. It's not money. It's not resources. It's having someone who shows up, every day, without fail. That's Daniel." Williams looked down at the documents spread across the table. He looked at Daniel, who was crying silently. He looked at Brittany, who had her face in her hands. Then he looked at me. "The board will need to deliberate," he said finally. "We'll take a 30-minute recess." The room emptied slowly. Daniel came to me immediately, pulling me into a hug. "Mom, I told you not to come." "I know, but you're my son, and Emma's my granddaughter. Where else would I be?" Outside in the hallway, Brittany's lawyer cornered me. "That was quite a performance, Miss Chen, but you should know that we're prepared to appeal any decision that doesn't go our way." "Appeal all you want," I said calmly. "But you're going to have a hard time explaining to a family court judge why the school district recommended primary custody stay with the parent who has consistently shown up for their child." He walked away, and I saw Brittany standing alone by the water fountain. She looked smaller somehow, without her lawyer and her confidence. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. She saw me looking and walked over. "You must think I'm a terrible person." "I think you're a person who made choices," I said carefully. "Choices that prioritized your career over your daughter. Maybe you had your reasons. Maybe you thought you were doing the right thing. But Emma needed you, and you weren't there." "I wanted to give her everything," Brittany said softly. "I grew up poor, Miss Chen. We didn't have anything. I swore my daughter would never struggle like I did. I thought if I could just build something big enough, earn enough money, create enough success, I could protect her from everything." And there it was. The glimpse of humanity I'd been looking for. The reason behind the Instagram perfection and the desperate need to win. "Brittany," I said gently, "Emma isn't struggling. She's learning and growing and becoming exactly who she's meant to be. She doesn't need protection from her dyslexia. She needs support through it. And that's what Daniel gives her every single day." "I know," Brittany whispered. "I know that. I didn't know how to be the kind of mother she needed, the kind who sits patiently and helps with homework and doesn't get frustrated. I wanted to be, but I didn't know how." "It's not too late," I said. "Emma still needs her mother. Just maybe not full-time. Maybe what she needs is for you to show up for the time you do have with her. Really show up. Put down your phone. Skip the photo ops. Just be with her." Brittany nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I'm going to lose, aren't I? I think the board is going to recommend what's best for Emma, and right now that's staying primarily with Daniel, but that doesn't mean you lose Emma. Unless you let your pride get in the way of being her mother." Before she could respond, the clerk called us back in. The board had reached their decision. We filed back into the room and took our seats. Superintendent Williams looked tired as he picked up a prepared statement. "This board has carefully considered all the evidence presented today. We've reviewed Emma Chen's educational records, her IEP progress, and the testimony from both parents. We've also considered Emma's own expressed preferences." He paused, looking directly at Daniel. "Mr. Chen, your dedication to your daughter's education is remarkable. The progress Emma has made under your care speaks to your commitment and your effectiveness as a parent. The board finds no evidence that Emma's current placement is detrimental to her well-being. In fact, all evidence suggests she is thriving." He turned to Brittany. "Miss Rodriguez, while we acknowledge your desire to provide additional resources for Emma, we find that the resources she currently receives through her father and the school district are more than adequate. Moreover, we are concerned about the disruption a change in primary custody would cause to Emma's educational and emotional stability." He looked back down at his papers. "Therefore, this board recommends to the family court that primary physical custody of Emma Chen remain with her father, Daniel Chen. Miss Rodriguez will maintain her current visitation schedule, with the recommendation that she prioritize attendance and active engagement during her scheduled time. The room erupted. Brittany's lawyer immediately began arguing about appeals and procedural errors. Daniel collapsed in his chair, sobbing. I put my hand on his shoulder and felt him shaking. But I was watching Williams. He'd pulled me aside after everyone else had left. "Margaret, I need to tell you something," he said quietly. "That case hit close to home for me. My son has ADHD. His mother wanted to put him in a private school, said the public school couldn't handle his needs, but I fought to keep him where he had support, where he had teachers who knew him. I remember," I said. "You told me about it when you first became superintendent. You gave me advice then. You said the best thing for a child isn't always the most expensive thing. It's the thing that makes them feel safe and valued. I never forgot that. You made the right call today, Jim." We both did. 3 months later, Emma brought home her report card. All S's for satisfactory. A note from her teacher: "Emma is a joy to have in class. Her reading has improved tremendously, and she's become one of our most enthusiastic participants in literature circles." We were at my house, the three of us, Daniel, Emma, and me, making grilled cheese with no crusts. Emma was reading out loud from a chapter book, stumbling occasionally but self-correcting with confidence. "Grandma," she said between pages, "can I tell you something?" "Anything, sweetheart." I was scared that day when I talked to the people on the computer. Mom told me I should say I wanted to live with her. She said I'd get to go to a fancy school and have lots of new toys. Daniel and I exchanged glances. "But then they asked me where I felt like me," Emma continued. "And I knew the answer. I feel like me with you and Dad, even if we don't have a fancy house or lots of money. Because you guys make me feel like my special reader brain is okay." I pulled her into a hug, and Daniel joined us. The three of us stood there in my kitchen, holding on to each other while the grilled cheese got a little too brown on the stove. "Emma," I said softly, "your special reader brain isn't just okay, it's wonderful. And you know what? Some of the most successful people in the world have dyslexia. Entrepreneurs and artists and scientists, and yes, even teachers. Your brain works differently, but that's your superpower." "Dad says that too," Emma said. "He says I see things other people miss because I have to look harder." "Your dad's right, he usually is." Daniel laughed, wiping his eyes. "Mom, thank you. For everything you did, for fighting for us when I didn't have the strength to fight anymore. Daniel, I spent 30 years fighting for other people's children. Did you really think I wouldn't fight for my own grandchild?" A year later, Brittany did something that surprised me. She showed up to Emma's IEP meeting, not with a lawyer, not with demands, just with a notebook and a willingness to listen. She sat quietly while the team discussed Emma's progress, asked thoughtful questions, and at the end, she thanked Daniel for everything he was doing. She never got majority custody, but she started showing up for her weekends, started actually engaging with Emma instead of just posting about her, started asking Daniel for advice on how to help with homework, started being a mother instead of a brand. It wasn't perfect. There were still tensions, still disagreements, still moments where Brittany's pride got in the way. But Emma had both parents in her life, each contributing what they could. And she had me, her grandmother, who taught her that fighting for what's right sometimes means standing up in a room where nobody expects you and refusing to back down. The last time I saw Superintendent Williams, it was at the grocery store. He was with his son, now a teenager, helping him read the shopping list. The boy had headphones on and was moving his finger along the words, concentrating hard. "Principal Chen," Williams said, smiling. "I've been meaning to tell you. My son just got accepted to Portland State. He wants to be a special education teacher." "Because someone showed him that learning differences aren't limitations," I said. "Because someone showed us both that the right support at the right time can change everything." I thought about Emma, now 9, reading at a 6th grade level and writing stories about brave girls who saw the world differently. I thought about Daniel, still teaching 3rd grade, still changing lives one struggling reader at a time. I thought about Brittany, slowly learning what it meant to be present. And I thought about that conference room, that moment when I stood up and refused to let my family be dismissed. That moment when I used everything I'd learned in 30 years to fight for the one thing that mattered most. Sometimes the best thing you can do for your children is teach them to stand up, and sometimes the best thing you can do for your grandchildren is show them what that looks like. I paid for my groceries and drove home through the Portland streets, past the schools where I'd spent my career, past the playground where Emma now played with her friends, past the small apartment where Daniel was probably helping her with homework right now. And I smiled, because I knew that when Emma grew up and told her own story, she'd remember the day her grandmother walked into that conference room and fought for her. She'd remember that sometimes love isn't quiet or polite or convenient. Sometimes love is standing up in a room full of people who've already made up their minds and changing them. That's what mothers do. That's what grandmothers do. We show up, we fight. We never, ever give up on the people we love. And when Emma's old enough, when she faces her own battles and her own challenges, she'll know exactly what to do, because she learned from the best. She learned from her father, who showed her that patience and consistency matter more than money. She learned from her mother, who eventually showed her that it's never too late to change. And she learned from me, her grandmother, who showed her that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is walk into a room where you're not expected, look the people in power in the eye, and demand justice. Not just for yourself, not even just for your family, but for every child who learns differently, every child who struggles, every child who needs someone to believe in them enough to fight. That's my legacy, not the programs I built or the policies I changed or the 30 years I spent as a principal. My legacy is Emma, reading a chapter book before bed, Daniel, teaching his students that different doesn't mean less, and Brittany, slowly learning that the best gifts you can give your child aren't things you can buy. My legacy is love that shows up, every single day, without fail. And that's enough.